So thank you everyone for joining me today. My name is Mary and I'm with the risk control team here at HAI Group. We are kicking off Playground Safety Week a little earlier than usual this year, and our session today is going to focus on how you can improve upon and enhance playground safety at your organizations. Please submit any questions or comments you have through the chat, and I will do my best to get to these either during the session or we'll leave some time at the end as well. For those of you who may not be familiar with HAI Group, we are a family of companies founded by and dedicated to housing. We protect, preserve, and promote the sustainability of affordable housing. And we offer a wide range of services to over 1,400 housing organizations nationwide. We do have a brief evaluation for this course, so you can scan this QR code with your smartphone, or we'll also put a link in the chat so you can easily access it from your browser. I'll have this up again at the end of the course as well. So we've got a pretty quick session today. It should run about 30 minutes or less. And some of our learning objectives for the session are going to be discussing and reviewing age-appropriate playground equipment, identifying recommended surfacing materials, covering common playground hazards, and essentials to maintaining playgrounds. I'm also going to speak quickly on the playground poster and essay contest that we host every year at the end of the session. So we're going to start off with talking about playground injuries, which I think kind of helps stress the importance of this topic. So over 200,000 children under the age of 14 are treated in emergency rooms across the US every year due to playground injuries, per the CDC. And the most recent study found that falls are the most common cause of injury, as well as the most common cause of fatal accidents. So because of that, selecting the appropriate type of equipment is a key piece in preventing these playground injuries, and your playground equipment should fit the age groups that will be using it. So children have different needs and abilities, and they're at different stages in their development depending on their age. So therefore, playgrounds for toddlers should have different equipment compared to a playground for an 8-year-old. The older children are able to handle equipment like ladders and vertical sliding poles better than a young child could. It's also important to have separate zones identified based on those age groups. And then also just keep in mind how these are set up. So you don't want to have toddlers having to walk right in front of a swing to get to their play area. Another thing to keep in mind when you're selecting your equipment is just the overall costs of maintaining a playground. It's not a one-time expense, and you really need to make sure that you're budgeting for playground maintenance year after year. So things like repairing the surfacing or making different equipment repairs. On the chart here, you can see we have some examples of the different types of equipment for the various different age groups. So from toddler age, preschool age, and then grade school. We will be sending out a copy of this slide, so you will have all of this information. There is some equipment that we do not recommend for children of any age. The first is trampolines. They're really kind of one of the top offenders. While these are fun for children, they can result in some serious injuries, including head injuries. Just a simple Google search will yield tons of articles on trampoline-related injuries, so we really strongly suggest that you don't allow these on your property. If you have any scattered sites, prohibiting the trampolines at those locations is really important because you don't typically have consistent visibility at those homes. So including it in lease agreements and making sure that your staff is looking out for this during inspections or while they're at that location for a work order or if they're just driving by. Another one is multiple occupancy swings. So swings that are intended for more than one user are not recommended due to the risk of impact injury from the additional weight of the swing and then that additional occupant. And then rope swings. So the ropes can fray or they can form a loop. And these are not recommended because if it does form that loop, then that is the potential for a strangulation hazard. Allowing residents to have their own playgrounds on their property is a question that we get from time to time. And that decision is ultimately up to your agency, but there are some risks to keep in mind, just a couple things to point out. In most cases, you are relying on the resident to maintain and inspect their own playground. So this can lead to the playground being in poor or just kind of generally damaged condition. You also don't have control over who is using that playground, since it could be the residents, but it can also be visitors, their friends, and whatnot. So ideally, resident-owned playgrounds would be prohibited from your property. But if you do choose to allow them, we do suggest at least having a strict policy in place, outlining that it's the residents' responsibility to properly maintain their playground. Your agency should also be documenting who has a playground and then making sure that those playgrounds are included during unit inspections and then removed if necessary. Another thing just to point out, your policy may say that the housing organization is not liable for any issues or injuries that arise from the playground, but just keep in mind that you are still allowing this equipment onto your property. So at the end of the day, liability may still fall on your agency. But again, even if you do allow residents to have their own playground equipment, we do still say to prohibit trampolines. So we're going to move on to talking about playground surfacing. This is one of the most important safety factors in reducing head injuries from falls. And it's also probably the most common recommendation we issue for playgrounds during our on-site surveys. So hard surfaces like concrete or asphalt really should never be used in the playground area. If you look at the photo that I have here on the screen, if a young child were to fall from that stair platform, or even after going down that slide, they're much more likely to get a head injury if they fall onto that concrete surface compared to that rubberized surface. The concrete just doesn't have any of those shock absorbing abilities. And you can see that it looks like there is a rubber tile kind of off to the side, possibly kicked over or blown over. So this is something that would be identified during an inspection and immediately corrected. Here is another example of a surface that is in much need of attention. So this is not providing any protection for a child if they were to fall from that landing. And then it's also a tripping hazard with that unlevel surface. So in addition to concrete and asphalt surfacing that we just spoke on, dirt and grass are also not appropriate because they also don't have those shock absorbing factors either. Another one is CCA treated wood mulch. That's not recommended. Some older playground wood, including wood chip surfacing, was pressure treated with chemicals, which have since been deemed unsafe due to the arsenic levels in them. The good news is since 2003, so for about 20 years, this wood has not been used in playgrounds. So it shouldn't be an exposure for most, but it is just something to bring to your attention if you do possibly have an older playground. Some recommended surfaces are rubber mats, pea gravel, engineered wood fiber, which is a wood product that looks very similar to landscaping mulch, but it's actually designed specifically for use as a playground safety surface, shredded rubber, and sand. One thing to point out with sand, it is one of the lesser effective materials in terms of impact absorption. So basically you'll just need more of it to achieve those same safety requirements. But it can also be a bit difficult to maintain. It can attract animal waste, and it's also easier for things to become buried and not completely visible. If you do have any of these loose fill surfaces, just keep in mind that they can compress about 25% over time due to just normal use and weathering. So because of this, it does require just more frequent maintenance to make sure that the levels of those materials don't drop. If that level were to drop, then it wouldn't protect against a head injury as it should if a child were to fall. So this chart here just shows how much fill is required to protect against certain fall heights. So if we look at the first one, how you'll read this is you'll need 6 inches of the shredded rubber to protect against a fall from 10 feet or above. If you go down to the next one, you'll need 9 inches of sand to protect against a fall from 4 feet, and so on. And I mentioned just before that the loose fill will compress about 25% over time. So this is something that has to be considered when planning the playground. So for example, if your playground will require 9 inches of wood chips, then your initial fill level should be 12 inches to account for that 25% loss. This photo shows an example of loose fill surfacing that's being worn away at a high traffic area underneath those swings. This is a common issue. We actually see this pretty frequently. You'll see it under swings, at the end of slides, and essentially just additional surfacing material would need to be placed in that area. Not only is there not enough material there to protect against the fall, but it's also a tripping hazard with that underlying material being exposed. Another thing just to keep in mind, the loose fill surfacing should be raked on a regular basis just to ensure that there is an appropriate and consistent depth throughout the whole playground area. And then also be on the lookout for frozen loose fill surfaces during winter months if you're in a colder climate. Most surfacing that freezes will no longer function as protective surfacing as it's designed to. But even if the first few inches are loose, that base layer may be frozen. So it is recommended that children don't use the playground under those conditions. And then drainage. So if you notice that there's pooling of water over your surfacing, this can be due to kind of a larger drainage issue. Poor drainage can lead to deterioration and ineffectiveness of your surface over time. In more drastic cases like this photo, it can also pose a serious injury and drowning risk for children. I'm not sure if you guys can tell, but there's actually ducks swimming in the background of this playground surface. And then just to point out some other issues with this playground, kind of unrelated to the draining, is it looks like the surface is only grass. And the equipment looks to be pretty old, possibly deteriorating condition. So this is something that A, should be receiving frequent inspections to make sure that it's, in working order. And then B, there should probably be some internal discussions happening on, what the future plans are for this playground, if it should be removed and or replaced. So a few other hazards to mention, anything that can crush or shear limbs. So this can be caused by any moving parts relative to each other or a fixed part during a normal cycle. So for example, a seesaw. To help determine if there is a possible crush or shear point, you want to consider the likelihood of a child getting a body part inside the point and then the closing force around that point. So these points can be due to just kind of the inherent design of a piece of equipment and how it's meant to operate, like that seesaw example, but it can also be the result of wear and tear over time or incorrect installation. Another one, any projections on a playground shouldn't be able to entangle a child's clothing, and they also shouldn't be large enough to impale or puncture a child. And I'll show you a photo of that in just a second. And then drawstrings on clothing. So those, of course, can become entangled in the playground equipment. You can post signage warning this risk so children know not to wear clothing with loose strings. And then also make sure that you don't have any equipment with the ropes that aren't secured at both ends, like I had mentioned early on. So this is an example of a projection on a playground, and you can see that the bolt is kind of protruding out. This is something that happened over time. It's not designed to be like this. So this is something that should be picked up during an inspection, and then that piece of equipment should be repaired. Head entrapment is a serious concern on playgrounds. A child's head may become entrapped if they enter either feet first or head first. So you want to look out for any openings that are greater than 3.5 inches and less than 9 inches. There is a measurement testing tool. It's shown there on that third photo on the slide. And that can be used just to make sure that your playground doesn't have any of these potential entrapments. The second photo is actually a piece of equipment that was recalled a couple years ago, I believe, just due to the potential head entrapment. So some of those spaces in there are within that 3.5 to 9 inch range. Also, another thing to point out, children should never wear their bicycle helmets while on a playground. I have seen that from time to time. There have been recent incidents where a child wearing their bicycle helmet became entrapped in a space that wouldn't normally be considered a head entrapment. So just another thing to look out for. Another one is sharp corners and edges. So any sharp point can, of course, cause serious, lacerations, cuts to a children. And these often develop as a result of wear and tear on the equipment over time. They may be found on wood equipment when it's no longer smooth, and it can cause splinters. Also on the corners of equipment. So you want to make sure that all of the corners are rounded, and any metal edge should have that rounded capping. And then tripping and suspended hazards. So the playground area should be free from any tripping hazards or change in elevation. Remember, there's going to be children running around that playground all day. Any concrete footing for anchoring the equipment should be installed below ground level. So they aren't, if it's above ground level, then that can cause a child to trip over it. And then also consider using different colors to indicate changes in elevation. So for example, if you have a surfacing containment wall that may not be highly visible to a child running, consider making it kind of a more obvious color, like the contrast that we see in this photo. And then for suspended hazards, so an example of that is a cable or a rope that's connected from one piece of the playground to another. Again, you do see these from time to time. If you do have any of these types of cables on your playground, just make sure that they're installed kind of away from that high traffic area, and then also make sure that they're easily identifiable. So for a bright color, for example. Also, they should be fastened at both ends just to ensure that it doesn't pose any type of strangulation hazard if it were to become detached at one end. So you don't have to submit your response, but this is kind of just answer to yourselves. When was the last time you inspected your playground? What were some of the issues that you found? Did you document these? How are they fixed? What was a follow-up? The key to mitigating playground injuries and losses is just having a really strong proactive playground maintenance program. You always want to be following the manufacturer's maintenance instructions and what they recommend in terms of inspection schedules. The National Program for Playground Safety put out the statistic that around 60% of all playground injuries that result in litigation list a lack of maintenance as that primary cause of injury. So your inspection frequency should really correlate with your playground usage. In general, we say inspect the playgrounds about monthly, but keep in mind that during spring, summer, maybe into the fall months, your playground's probably seeing much higher usage, therefore weekly or even daily inspections may be necessary. You want to make sure that you are documenting your inspections. We have a sample inspection form up here on this slide. We're also going to be sending out a PDF copy of that with the follow-up email, so you will have that for reference. Just some things to look out for when you are doing your inspections. Broken glass and trash, any broken equipment, loose, damaged, or missing parts. Vandalism, that's something we see pretty often. Any rusted metal, rotted equipment, any issues with your servicing, of course, and then any user modifications. So if any of the equipment is rearranged, or if someone possibly came and tied a rope on the equipment, just look out for those changes. You want to make sure that whoever is responsible for inspecting the playground understands the hazards and what to look out for and why it would be a concern. And then also encourage your residents to report hazards that they find and make sure they know who to report them to. This is something that you can also include on your playground signage, which I'll speak on in just a second. I have a couple of photos of some playground issues we've come across over the last few years. In this first one, You can see that the top of this equipment has been damaged. Pretty easy for a child to cut themselves on that. So that's something that definitely would need to be replaced. This one, it may be a little bit difficult to tell at first, but in this photo, there's actually a broken television in that tunnel with some other broken pieces of the TV on the landing. So this, of course, is going to be a hazard to a child or anyone else that's on that playground. And in this photo, it looks as though the owners tried to make a temporary repair with some wood boards. You can see they're on both sides of that. So this is just something that would need to have more of a permanent repair. So any problems or deficiencies found during the inspection should be noted, repaired, and or replaced immediately. And all of that really needs to be documented. If the repair isn't something that can be done immediately, so if you're waiting for a piece of equipment to come in, then make sure that you're at least closing off that section of the playground. And if you can't close off just that section, it's best to close down the entire playground until you are able to make that repair. And then also document any incident that occurs on the playground. These should always be followed up with an accident investigation just to make sure you're with compliance, and also identifying any areas that may be in need of improvement on the playground. So as far as rules, we always recommend posting rules in the playground area. Again, this is another very common recommendation that we issue during our surveys. These can identify the intended age groups that the equipment is for. They can state the hours of operation, any prohibited activities, saying that there's no glass allowed, no food, no trespassing, weapons. Having adult supervision is also recommended as a rule, just to ensure that a young child isn't left alone where they may be more prone to injuries. And in general, the rules will really vary by your agency, and they're generally up to your discretion. So getting towards the end, ideally playground areas will be fenced off. Fencing can help prevent children from leaving that area and potentially wandering off. The fencing can also protect the playground area, especially if it's located next to a parking lot. That fencing can serve as kind of a protective barrier between the playgrounds and then those vehicles. Also, it's a good idea to provide seating areas. This can help to encourage adult supervision. And then keep in mind shading. So having shady areas nearby could be natural, such as a tree, or man-made. That will give children and their caregivers a place to cool off, especially during warmer weather. Another thing that's not listed on this slide per se is surveillance. If you have security cameras installed to kind of monitor the grounds of your properties, it's a good idea to also allow visibility for these playground areas as well. This can be especially helpful after hours. We have seen some vandalism issues ranging, from someone damaging a piece of equipment all the way to burning down an entire playground. So the cameras may help serve as a deterrent, and it can also help with identifying potential suspects should something happen. So the biggest takeaway from this kind of quick little session today is the importance of inspecting your playgrounds first and foremost. Keeping an eye out for some of the hazards that we talked about and addressing these as soon as possible. Playgrounds are really great for children in terms of development and socialization, but we do need to make sure that they're also a safe place for them. Along with that, we run our playground safety poster and essay contest every year. And through this program, just a high level how it works, your organization would hold your own local poster and essay contest for 3 separate age groups during Playground Safety Week, which is actually next month, April 24th through the 28th. And their posters and essays should go along with our theme this year, which is Playground Superheroes. So you would hold your own contest and then select a first place poster winner for each age group, and then a first place essay winner for each age group, and send those first place submissions into us. We then hold our own judging back here at HAI Group with our staff, and we will select a first, second, and third place winner, each poster, essay per age group from all those submissions that we receive. And we award prizes to the winning residents. So you will need to register to participate by March 31st for this. And then all submissions, after you host your own local contest, those first place submissions need to be sent to us by that first week in May. I will send out a link to the flyer with more information in the follow-up email. And this is also available on our website under the Risk Management Center. We have an icon for contests, and that's where you'll find information on this. I have the QR code again up here and the link for the course evaluation. I'm going to leave this on the screen and just see if we have any questions. Let's see.
Mary, I think Cheryl had a comment. She had her hand raised earlier.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Cheryl.
How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Good. We miss you out here in California.
Oh, me too.
Get out here. It's raining though. Don't come now. I was asking about the wood chips. There's been a debate. I live in a homeowners association, and some of the homes wanted to put wood chips down. Now they're saying that out here they don't recommend them 5 feet from homes for fires. And then the other thing is termites. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, I assumed that the wood chips were treated to keep termites out, but are they concerned about termites in wood chips?
That's not really something that we've come across. Some of the wood chips are the engineered wood fiber that's actually designed for playground surfacing. So I would imagine that there's some protective measures there. But as far as a fire risk, yeah, that's, it's not just you guys in California. Hopefully the playground is not that close to any structure. So hopefully that wouldn't necessarily be too big of an issue.
Okay, just curious if I had never heard of this, and somebody recently just told us, and I don't know if this is new, but that's why I was kind of questioning it. All right, thanks. Good to see you.
You as well. All right, I'm not seeing anything else. Over. So if there's no other questions, I just want to thank everyone for your attendance and your participation today. We will have a copy of this session. We'll post it online. We'll send it out via email. Also a copy of the slides and a couple additional resources for you. But if there's no other questions, then I hope everyone has a great day, and thank you again.
Thank you.